So let's get into the first historical record that I am aware of a realist account from Plato, Platonic realism. So this one's tough to get on board with. I'm gonna just lay that out there at the beginning, but I will say unless you're religious, then it's pretty easy. But but if you're not, so universals exist in an abstract realm of forms.
Oh.
Every particular thing around us has a perfect form of itself that exists within the metaphysical realm of forms, independent of minds. So particulars get their form, and form is sort of just another word for a universal or a trait.
Mm-hmm.
Particulars get their forms from an abstract reality called the realm of forms, as he named it. And these forms sort of partake in that form, these particulars partake in that form by way of extracting the form from whatever the perfection of it is in the abstract realm. So just to keep it consistent, we'll keep it with redness. When there is a red car and a red apple, they are both red. They both have the form of red, or the universal red, and they both get that red from the same perfect red that exists in the abstract realm of forms. There is true perfect redness, and then particulars partake in that redness form in a less than perfect state.
So there is a perfect red.
There is a perfect, true, ultimate red. In the same way, there is a perfect, true, and ultimate human person, because that is also a universal. You and I are both human, and you and I are both partaking from the abstract form, the perfect abstract form of human, in flawed ways, in our flawed particular bodies.
I don't know why my mind went here, but I was just like, oh, so we're the Temu versions of the perfect human.
Yeah, every particular human is Temu human, because there is an abstract human that is perfect.
Yeah.
Right. And the same goes for everything else. There is a perfect version of it that imperfect particulars partake from.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's kind of weird. But
yeah, I don't like
including that. So you and I have talked about moral realism before, where moral right and wrongs truly exist independent of humans. There is such a thing as like the good.
Yeah.
That exists in the abstract realm of forms. There is the perfect good. And every time you and I do a good act, that is us partaking a little bit in the good. We embody the form of the good, at least for a little bit, while we give a baby a piece of candy. You know?
That could be good in some aspects.
That could be good. That could be bad. You're going to ruin his teeth. His or her teeth. So, math and numbers exist. All like equations, infinity. That is something that we are discovering, not inventing. Numbers. And you know what? This sounds kind of ridiculous, but it's not as ridiculous as it sounds.
I don't think it sounds very ridiculous at all, to be honest. I don't.
So you think 2 + 2 = 4 existed? The actual number, the abstract, not just what it represents in the world. You think the numbers existed before ever humans came around?
I guess maybe I'm latching on to the abstract nature of what math can be instead of the actual labels associated. I guess what I'm thinking when I think it's not ridiculous, I'm thinking of I've said this actually a couple times on this here show, where if I'm Ooga Booga and I have an apple and then I have another apple, I have 2 apples. I'm not going to call it 2, but it is 2.
Right.
It's the abstract counting.
It's what math represents in the world.
Yeah.
That exists. But you probably wouldn't say that the mathematics itself, the abstracted form of what it represents, also exists independently.
I guess on its
On its
face,
own.
I wouldn't say that, but I'd be very curious to see what the argument for it would be, because I
Well,
could maybe be swayed.
You and I have actually talked about this a little bit. I don't remember the context, but I actually think it was in the contingency argument for God video, because we talked about mathematics probably doesn't exist independent of minds, but what it represents in the world certainly does.
Yeah.
But that would be to say that 2 + 2 = 4. You and I would say that that is true, objectively true, and universally true.
Yeah.
But if 2 + 2 = 4 doesn't exist before minds, then it sort of by default has to be false, because it's not even existing in the first place. Which would be to say 2 + 2 = 4 was false before humans came around, which sounds stupid.
That doesn't make any sense.
That sounds stupid to say. Which would mean that 2 + 2 = 4 had to have existed, even the abstraction of it had to have existed before humans came along.
It had to exist. It just didn't have a name. But it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. If I don't have a name for something, I mean, that doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
And we can't also reduce realism to language. Like, people have different right. The abstract forms exist in themselves regardless of the semantics you use to describe them. Like,
Right.
they're their own thing, whether you call it something in one language versus another thing in another language.
Is it enough to say something can exist? So, like, I said this in that same episode, but if something can exist, does it? Right? If something
Right.
if
Yeah,
something
you-
can if something checks out, I guess we should suppose. If it's true, if it were to be thought of, isn't it just true?
Even if they didn't think about it.
Even if they didn't think about it. If 2 + 2 = 4 is just true, do we need to think about it for that to be real?
So you would say, like, even like the very microsecond of the Big Bang, before anything really formed, and it's just a hot ball of plasma. At that moment, even then, mathematics in all the ways we understand it exists. The Pythagorean theorem was real.
I don't think that's you got to get a little loose with your definition of real, I think. But
What you probably don't think is that it existed in the abstract realm of forms.
no, it's not.
But
No,
but okay, so I think we need to get a little bit more tight with our wording here. So when you say real, you said you got to get loose with your definition of real.
yeah.
What mathematics now, when I say 2 + 2 = 4, generally I'm saying two things in space and time added to another two particulars in space and time equals 4 particulars.
Yeah.
But getting rid of the particulars, in what way do you think the 2 + 2 = 4 also exists? Separate the particulars from the universals here. Do you think that exists? The universal.
With no particulars?
Right.
Shoot.
This brings it's I don't know. I don't know.
It's I want to say it still would exist, but then it comes down to, what is mathematics measuring, if not particulars and no conscious mind to think, what is the purpose of mathematics? But does it need a purpose, or does it? That question,
Because like if minds never came around, I think everybody would agree with this. If mind never came around, what we use mathematics to represent would always still exist. There would always be, 2 atoms plus 2 atoms equals 4 atoms.
right? That's easy.
That's easy. That's the easy
That
part.
argument is so easy. Math doesn't. I think math doesn't require the mind in an abstract sense.
Yeah,
But does it require matter?
exactly. If there is no particulars, does the mathematics still exist? And that's but
What do we mean by exist?
I don't know. If you said no, then that would mean you have to say something like 2 + 2 = 4 becomes not true by default, given no particulars, because it simply doesn't exist.
Or another, just to put that the opposite way, you would say that simply math requires particulars.
Or you would just say math is dependent on particulars. Yeah. Which could also be the case.
But if you said yes, though, what you're saying is the abstract, what it means to be math, exists outside of the need of anything physical.
Right. Outside of space and time, pretty much.
And then what exists
exactly. And then what do you exactly mean by exist there?
What does exist at all, regardless of math? What does exist in that space?
Yeah. If you remove space and time,
does anything exist?
Exactly. What exactly are we talking about by existence there?
I feel like given the fact that we can't make a firm claim that anything exists outside of space and time, I don't think we can make a firm claim that math does. So maybe we could put a stamp on this and we could say math requires particulars.
Which, meaning void of space and time, 2 + 2 = 4 is false by default because it doesn't exist. Which sounds weird because that sounds like an objective universal truth. But if the equation to make up that truth just simply doesn't exist to begin with, then that truth obviously can't be true.
I'm really trying to put together a thought here. I don't...
Dude, mathematics is a tough one when it comes to realism.
We would need to get a firm definition on what it means for an entity to exist at all.
Outside space and time.
Outside space and time.
Well, God, of course.
Does
that was a joke.
Exactly. Does the idea that a thing could be grouped and another thing could be grouped and those things can be counted, the very idea outside of matter and as outside of space, outside of time, does the very idea of it mean that math could exist? But then you'd fall back on, well, there's nothing to count. There's nothing to do.
There's
math
nothing
upon.
for the math to.
There's nothing for
the math
to represent.
loses meaning, in a sense.
But we know that to the conscious mind, math doesn't require matter.
Right. 2 + 2 exist. 2 + 2 = 4 exists universally.
Well, let me ask you this: we probably wouldn't have math without matter.
True, I mean.
We wouldn't. But knowing that we can do math outside of matter, we don't have to have things to count in order to count things, right?
Yeah.
Knowing that is possible, could we say that in the way it exists in a conscious mind, could it exist outside of space and time universally?
Well, that I think could be dependent on, is consciousness reliant on space and time? Because if it can exist within a conscious mind outside of space and time, the conscious mind has to exist outside of space and time.
Let me see if I can say this and be coherent. So what we're saying is that math can't exist outside of space and time because math originates in matter.
Math is dependent on particulars.
It's dependent on particulars. But then we're also saying that with the establishing of the conscious mind,
we don't need the
particulars. What if we just cut out the middleman? And now we've got the...
So this would be a question of, could someone You see, we invented, well, unless you're a realist, you would say we discovered. But from a nominalist perspective, we invented mathematics by way of tally marks to
Right.
count things for the sake of trade.
Right.
Which, so undoubtedly, particulars were the reason we came up with math. But the question really would be is it possible to have, for somebody to have invented math completely independent of a particular necessity of it?
I think that's an interesting question, and I want to talk about that. But also, does it matter? Does it matter why a person? What?
When you said does it matter, I took matter as in material.
Oh,
Does math matter? I thought well, that doesn't make any sense.
does the way does the way humanity I'm gonna use this perspective, discovered math, have any bearing on its reality outside of space and time? Its fundamentalness.
Well, if you were saying that math did exist outside of space and time, then sort of by necessity, you wouldn't have been saying we invented math. You would be
Yeah.
saying we discovered math.
Right. I get the other way to look at this is, again, to remove the counting of particulars from the equation, was maybe that only a tool to help us discover the abstract math, or that was
The particulars were a medium of us connecting with mathematics.
yeah.
I mean, if mathematics is real in a realist sense, then yes, I'm undoubtedly
That's what we're getting at.
right. But is it real in a realist sense is the question, and it's hard to know. I mean, because if you say yes, even that has its problems. Let's say we discovered math because it exists outside of space and time. That also presupposes that our conscious minds somehow have a connection with something outside of space and time. How are we communicating with something outside of space and time if we are ourselves nothing but particulars, matter in motion? See what I'm saying?
Yeah, that is where it falls apart, doesn't it? And also, what does it mean? What does it mean to exist? outside
Right,
of
exactly.
space and
We
time?
still haven't.
That's-
What does
we
it
haven't
mean?
tackled that yet.
Yeah. What is existing independent of space and time actually even mean? Yeah.
Unless you're Plato and it's some
Unless you invent your abstract realm of forms, rather.
yeah, rather.
Right.
I
Yeah.
don't, that's my hang up. I'm on board with math as the example at hand. Not requiring humans to exist, right? Not requiring
Right.
the conscious mind. I'm totally on board with that.
That
But
seems kind of intuitive. almost.
then you say, well, this has to exist, really exist
a real existence yeah.
outside of space and time, and that's where you lose me. I don't understand that.
But, and this is where
I guess I'm not supposed to understand it as a human ooga booga.
So this is where an extra week of research would have really helped me, because mathematics is kind of one of the deeper forms of realism that you can get into. But this is where I think my intuition nominalist juices start circulating, because would it not just be easier to say, yeah, mathematics, we invented it because of particulars that we needed to group and organize?
Instead of cutting out the middleman of particulars to establish realism, we just only focus on the middleman as the invention of that process.
Exactly.
And there is nothing before.
Right.
Yeah. No, that is
That's
certainly the easier solution.
right.
Here.
This seems easier as a nominalist than a realist. But the problems with that become if you are anomalous and mathematics only exists because we were here to invent it, you also then have to say, okay, then something like a objective mathematical truth becomes false by default once we disappear, which that doesn't seem right to say.
Well, I mean, could you just say then, because we said outside of the conscious mind, one thing, two thing. One thing, two thing.
The particulars that it represents always was true.
Could you just say that what math represents is objectively true, and we just put labels on it? We didn't invent it, but it also doesn't exist outside of space and time.
Sure. You could, I think, yeah, that also seems easier than finding a way to make it exist outside of space and time. So yeah, I this, again, I know this is coming from a little bit ignorant view of realism, but this just seems like an easier nominalist problem to answer. But like I said, mathematics, there are people that are a-religious, or atheist, as most people that would say, that also do believe in mathematical realism.
Yeah.
Because like one of the greatest physicists still alive today, Roger Penrose, the guy that came up with the CCC model of cosmology that theorized we're in an infinite loop of big bangs and big crunches.
Yeah.
He believes we're discovering mathematics. Reason being is because mathematics works a little bit too well in the realm of physics, like eerily well. When Newton invented calculus, well, it was either Newton or Leibniz. They were fighting for credit who invented calculus, but we'll just say Newton because that's what most people say. When he invented calculus, he invented something that he didn't realize was going to be as useful as it was. It's like when you make a shovel, you see something you want to dig, so you invent a shovel to dig it.
Yeah.
And then you realize this shovel you invented also can chop down trees before you ever knew trees existed. And the shovel can also spoon feed food and water to you before you ever knew food and water ever existed. And it's like, what is this thing that we invented, and why does it map onto things in reality? Like it's eerily useful in ways that we never foresaw with physics. So that, in that sense, maybe we are discovering mathematics, and somehow it is fundamental in reality because it works so weirdly well with describing the world around us. And that's an interesting view.
Instead of inventing math, we are How do you put that? We're discovering a way to understand the universe.
And mathematics is the medium.
It's not that we invented it. It's that
it's like mathematics is fundamental in a sense to matter.
But that doesn't require it to exist really.
Now, we'll get there. We haven't talked about Aristotelian realism yet. This actually sort of consolidates a lot of these problems that we're raising. Some of them, not all of them.